Zephyx stood at the entrance of Haven's rest space station, studying the strange metal structure that humans had built in the middle of nowhere. The alien's four eyes blinked in different patterns as he tried to understand why anyone would put a space station so far from any planet or major trade route. His green skin shifted colors slightly, showing his confusion. The Altarian Collective had sent Zephyx here for a simple job. He needed to watch these new creatures called humans and write a report about them. The galaxy had many different species, and the Collective was very good at helping new ones join their peaceful group. They had done this hundreds of times before. Zephyx walked through the station's corridors, his long legs making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. The air smelled different here. It had a strange mix of oil, food, and something else he could not name. The walls were covered with signs in human writing, most of which his translator could read. Some signs said things like warning, gravity may vary, and caution, humans at work. He found the place he was looking for. A big sign outside said, Murphy's Cantina in bright blue letters. Below it, smaller words said, cold beer, hot food, warm welcome. Zephyx did not understand what beer was, but his research said humans gathered in these places called bars to talk and drink liquids that made them feel good. The door slid open with a hiss, and Zephyx stepped inside. The bar was darker than the hallway, lit by yellow lights that cast long shadows. The room was full of humans sitting at tables and standing near a long counter. They were all different sizes and colors, wearing clothes that looked worn and practical. The smell hit him first. It was a mix of many things: cooking food, strange liquids, and the scent of humans themselves. His translator began working immediately, picking up dozens of conversations happening at once. The humans were loud, much louder than his own people. When they gathered together, a human behind the counter noticed him right away. This one was tall with brown hair and friendly eyes. He wore a clean white shirt and was wiping down glasses with a cloth. Well, hello there, the human said, smiling. First time in Murphy's? I'm Jake Morrison, and I run this place. What can I get you? Zephyx was surprised by how quickly the human had greeted him. Most species he knew were careful around strangers, especially ones that looked very different. But this human seemed happy to see him. I am Zephyx of the Altarian Collective, he said, his voice coming out in careful human words. I would like to observe your social customs. Perhaps you could recommend a beverage? Jake laughed, a sound that made Zephyx's ears twitch. Observe. Our customs, huh? You picked the right place for that. How about I start you with something mild? Maybe a beer that won't knock you over. Zephyx nodded and moved to an empty table in the corner. This spot would let him watch the whole room while staying out of the way. He pulled out a small device that would record everything for his report back home. The bar was full of activity. Humans sat in groups talking and laughing. Some played games with cards or small objects on the tables. Others watched screens showing moving pictures of humans hitting a ball with sticks. Everyone seemed relaxed and happy. Jake brought over a tall glass filled with golden liquid that had white foam on top. Here you go, friend. This is our mildest beer, brewed right here on the station. Zephyx tasted it carefully. The liquid was bitter but not unpleasant. It made his mouth feel strange but not in a bad way. Thank you. This is acceptable. Great. Let me know if you need anything else. We get all kinds here, so don't worry about fitting in. As Jake walked away, Zephyx began his observations. The humans around him seemed normal enough. They drank their beverages, ate food that smelled good, and talked to each other in friendly ways. Some touched each other on the shoulders or arms, which his research said was a sign of friendship among humans. A group at the next table was discussing something called work schedules. Another table had humans sharing pictures on small devices, showing each other images of other humans and strange animals. Everything seemed very civilized and peaceful. Zephyx started to relax. These humans did not seem much different from other species he had studied. They had social bonds. They consumed food and drink together, and they seemed to enjoy each other's company. This would be an easy report to write. A new human entered the bar, this one wearing dirty work clothes and heavy boots. The newcomer had short gray hair and hands that looked rough from hard work. Several humans called out greetings, and the rear newcomer waved back. "Pete," Jake called from behind the counter. "The usual?" "You bet," the human called Pete replied. "It's been a long day in the mines." Pete sat down at the bar near Zephix's table. Jake brought him a drink, and soon other humans were gathering around to talk. Zephix leaned closer to listen, thinking, this might be interesting for his cultural report. "How's the new site working out?" one human asked. Pete took a long drink before answering. "Well, we had some excitement today. Main air recycler went down about 6 hours into the shift. Zephix's translator worked to understand the words, and when it did, his skin color shifted to a pale yellow. An air recycler failure in a mine should mean immediate evacuation and emergency rescue procedures. This was a serious, life-threatening situation. But Pete was smiling. Zephix watched Pete take another drink, still smiling about the air recycler failure. The alien's 4 eyes focused on the human's face, looking for signs of stress or fear. There were none. Pete looked as calm as if he was talking about good weather. "So what did you do?" asked a woman who had joined the group. She had short black hair and wore a pilot's jacket with patches from different space routes. "Well, Lisa, you know how it is," Pete said with a laugh. "We couldn't wait for rescue. The company needs those rare metals, and we had quotas to meet, so we did what any sensible person would do." Zephix leaned forward. Now Pete would explain the proper emergency procedures his people had followed. Perhaps humans had very advanced safety systems that made such situations less dangerous than they seemed. "We sealed off the broken section with plastic sheets and duct tape," Pete continued. "Then Jimmy had this great idea. He remembered that the old mining suits had their own air supplies, even though they're not supposed to work anymore. So we patched them up with more duct tape and kept digging." The humans around the table laughed and nodded as if this made perfect sense. Zephix's skin turned a deeper yellow, almost orange. His cultural analysis device started making soft beeping sounds, indicating it was having trouble processing what it was hearing. Lisa shook her head with a grin. "Duct tape and prayer, right? That's the human way. Speaking of which, I had my own fun this week." "Oh no," said Jake from behind the bar. "What did you do this time, Lisa?" "Nothing too crazy," she said, waving her hand. "Just had to make a delivery to the outer rim. Simple cargo run, should have been easy money." Zephix's translator was working. Hard to keep up. A cargo run to the outer rim sounded routine enough. Maybe this conversation would return to normal topics. "Everything was going fine until my navigation computer decided to die right in the middle of the Kepler asteroid field," Lisa continued. "You know that field they tell you never to enter without a full nav system and backup crew." Several humans made sympathetic sounds, but they were still smiling. Zephix's analysis device beeped louder. Flying through an asteroid field without navigation was suicide for any rational species. The rocks moved too fast and there were too many of them to avoid by sight alone. "So naturally I turned off the autopilot and flew it manually," Lisa said, as if this was the most obvious solution in the universe. "Naturally," agreed Pete. "Can't let a bunch of floating rocks tell you where you can and can't go." Zephix's device was now making constant beeping sounds. He tried to turn down the volume, but his hands were shaking slightly. These humans were describing actions that should have killed them, and they were treating it like entertainment. "The best part," Lisa went on, "was when I realized I could use the gravitational pull from the big asteroids to slingshot around the smaller ones. Made the whole trip actually faster than the safe route would have been." "Did you report the new route to navigation control?" asked a new voice. Zephix looked over to see another human approaching. This one was wearing work clothes covered in oil stains and carried a toolbox. "Hey, Roy," Lisa called out. "And no, I didn't report it. They'd just put up more warning signs and ruin the fun for everyone else." Roy Henderson set down his toolbox and ordered a drink from Jake. "Fair enough. I swear, sometimes I think the safety people have never actually worked on a ship before." "What do you mean?" Pete asked. Roy took a sip of his beer and shook his head. "They keep putting out these manuals about how to repair things, page after page of proper procedures and approved parts. But half the time we don't have the right parts, and the other half the proper procedure takes too long." Zephix's skin was now shifting between orange and red. His species changed colors based on emotional state, and right now he was moving, from confusion to genuine alarm. Like yesterday, Roy continued, the main power coupling on a freight hauler started failing. According to the manual, I needed to shut down the entire ship, order replacement parts, and wait 3 days for them to arrive. But the ship had a delivery deadline to meet. So you ignored the manual? Lisa asked, though she sounded like she already knew the answer. Of course I ignored the manual. I took apart an old coffee machine and used the heating element to bypass the failing section. Then I wrapped the whole thing in cooling tape and connected it to the ship's water system for extra cooling. The humans around the table nodded appreciatively. Zefix's analysis device was now flashing red warning lights along with the beeping. His translator was struggling with phrases like jury-rigged, creative engineering, and if it's stupid but it works. Did it work? Pete asked. Worked better than the original design, Roy said proudly. The ship's been running for 2 weeks now, and the captain says it's the smoothest his engines have ever been. Jake wiped down a glass and joined the conversation. You know, I think that's what I love about humans. We don't let little things like impossible or safety regulations stop us from getting things done. Zefix's 4 eyes blinked in rapid sequence, a sign of extreme stress in his species. These humans were not just ignoring safety procedures. They were actively proud of ignoring them. They treated life-threatening situations as problems to solve, with creativity rather than emergencies to escape from. Roy, you still fixing alien tech? Lisa asked. All the time, Roy replied. Just last week, someone brought me a Centauri power core that was supposedly beyond human understanding. The owner said 3 different alien mechanics told him it was broken forever. And? Pete prompted. And I took it apart with a regular screwdriver and found out they just had the polarity backwards. Flipped a few connections and it's been running at 120% efficiency ever since. The humans laughed again. Zefix realized that his hands were gripping his drink so tightly that the glass was starting to crack. These creatures were not just surviving against impossible odds. They were improving technology they did not understand, and treating the laws of physics as suggestions rather than rules. The funny thing is, Roy added, the alien who sold it to the humans said it was impossible to modify. But you know what they say about the word impossible? Yeah, Lisa agreed with a grin. It just means no one creative has tried yet. Zefix's skin was now a deep red color, and his cultural analysis device had given up beeping and was just displaying error messages. He was beginning to understand that this was not going to be a routine diplomatic report. Zefix tried to calm himself by taking deep breaths, but the air in the bar felt thick and strange. His skin was still showing red patches, and his analysis device had stopped working completely. He set it aside and decided to rely on his own observations, though he was starting to wish he had never entered this place. A new human walked into the bar and Zefix noticed something different about this one immediately. The newcomer moved with a straight back and steady steps. His clothes were clean and simple, and he had short gray hair. When the other humans saw him, they called out greetings with obvious respect. Danny, Pete called out. Come join us. We're sharing work stories. The man named Danny Price walked over to their group and sat down. Jake brought him a drink without being asked, which told Zefix this human was a regular customer. What kind of work stories? Danny asked, his voice calm and measured. The usual, Lisa said with a grin. Close calls, creative solutions, and why safety manuals are more like suggestions. Danny smiled, but it was a different kind of smile than the others had been showing. It was quieter, more serious. Well, if we're talking about creative solutions, I might have a few stories from my military days. Zefix's translator worked to understand the word military. When it finished processing, his skin shifted to a new color entirely, a pale blue that indicated deep confusion. Military meant organized fighting between groups of the same species. His research had mentioned this concept, but he had thought it was just a historical curiosity. Oh, this should be good, Roy said, settling back in his chair. Danny was a colonial marine for 15 years. What's a colonial marine? Pete asked. We were the people they sent when a colony was in trouble, Danny explained. Pirates, hostile aliens, natural disasters, equipment failures that threatened whole settlements. If it was dangerous and needed fixing, they sent us. Zephyx leaned forward despite his growing alarm. Perhaps this military concept was about rescue and protection. That would make more sense for a civilized species. I remember one mission, Danny continued. We got a distress call from a mining colony on Kepler 7. The message just said, "Help us," and then cut out. No other information, no follow-up signals, nothing. What did you find when you got there? Lisa asked. The colony was under attack by something we'd never seen before. These creatures were about twice the size of humans, had thick armor plating, and could spit acid that melted through metal. They had surrounded the main settlement and were trying to break through the defenses. Zephyx's skin went completely blue. These humans had encountered hostile alien lifeforms and had not immediately retreated to get help from more advanced civilizations. His own people would have called for assistance from the collective's military specialists. How many Marines? Did they send for the rescue? Roy asked. 12, Danny said simply. The table went quiet for a moment. Even the other humans seemed surprised by this number. 12? Pete repeated. Against armored acid-spitting aliens that had surrounded an entire colony? That's what we had, Danny said with a shrug. Command said it was all they could spare. The rest of the fleet was dealing with other emergencies. Zephyx calculated quickly in his head. 12 individuals against an unknown number of dangerous creatures, with the lives of an entire human settlement at stake. Any rational species would have declared the situation hopeless and evacuated the survivors if possible. So what did you do? Lisa asked, though her tone suggested she had an idea. We did what Marines do, Danny said. We studied the problem and found a solution. Which was, Roy prompted. We noticed the creatures avoided the colony's industrial area. Turned out they didn't like the electromagnetic fields from the big mining equipment. So we rigged up portable field generators using parts from the colony's machinery. Zephyx's translator was struggling again. These humans had not only engaged the hostile creatures, but had analyzed their behavior and developed countermeasures using improvised equipment. But that just kept them away, right? Pete said. You still had to deal with them somehow. Danny's smile became wider. That's where it got interesting. We realized the creatures were attracted to heat signatures, so we set up a series of decoy heat sources leading away from the colony and into a canyon about 2 kilometers out. You led them into a trap, Lisa said, nodding with approval. We led them into what we called a creative solution, Danny corrected. See, that canyon had unstable rock formations. The colonists had been planning to blast it clear for safety reasons but hadn't gotten around to it yet. Zephyx felt his breathing becoming irregular. He was beginning to see where this story was going, and it was making him feel sick. We positioned explosives throughout the canyon walls, Danny continued. Then we sent one Marine, Johnson, to lead the creatures in while the rest of us triggered the charges from safe positions. One Marine? Roy asked. That sounds incredibly dangerous. Johnson volunteered, Danny said. He was the fastest runner and the best at dodging things. Plus, he said it sounded fun. The word fun hit Zephyx like a physical blow. This human had thought leading deadly alien creatures into an explosive trap sounded enjoyable. Did it work? Pete asked. Perfectly. We collapsed half the canyon on top of them. Problem solved, colony saved, and we only used 12 people and some mining. Explosives. The humans around the table were nodding and making appreciative sounds. Zephyx realized they were not horrified by this story. They were impressed by it. That's the thing about humans, Jake said from behind the bar. Give us a problem that should be impossible to solve, and we'll find a way to solve it anyway. Usually, by doing something that makes the problem even more dangerous first, Lisa added with a laugh. And then using that extra danger as part of the solution, Roy agreed. Danny raised his glass. 2 creative solutions and the people crazy enough to try them. The other humans raised their glasses as well. 2 creative solutions, they said together, and drank. Zephyx stared at them in complete bewilderment. These creatures had just celebrated a story about 12 individuals defeating an army of hostile aliens through improvised tactics and controlled explosions. They had treated it like a successful engineering project rather than a desperate battle for survival. His skin was now cycling through colors rapidly, unable to settle on any single emotional state. The humans noticed his distress, but misunderstood the cause. "You okay there, Zephix?" Jake asked with concern. "You look a little green around the gills." "Well, greener than usual." "I am processing new information," Zephix managed to say. "First time hearing human war stories?" Danny asked kindly. "They can be a bit much if you're not used to them." Zephix nodded weakly. War stories. These humans had many war stories, which meant they had many wars, and they told these stories like other species might share recipes or gardening tips. "Don't worry," Pete said. "We're mostly peaceful these days. We only fight when we have to." "When do you have to?" Zephix asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. The humans looked at each other and started laughing again. Zephix watched the humans laugh about when they had to fight, and he felt something cold settle in his stomach. His skin had stopped changing colors and was now a steady pale gray, which in his species meant complete shock. "We fight when someone tells us something can't be done," Lisa said, grinning at Danny. "Or when they put up signs saying we're not allowed somewhere," Pete added. "Or when the math says it's impossible," Roy said, raising his glass again. Danny nodded seriously. "But mostly, we fight when someone needs help, and everyone else says it's too dangerous to try." A new voice joined the conversation. "Did someone say dangerous?" Zephix turned to see a woman approaching their table. She wore clothes that looked expensive but practical, and she carried herself like someone used to being in charge. Her brown hair was pulled back, and she had the same confident look in her eyes that all these humans seemed to share. "Helen," Jake called out, "how was the run to the Vega system?" Helen Burke sat down with the group and accepted a drink from Jake. "Interesting as always, though I think the Galactic Trade Commission is getting tired of my shipping routes." "Why?" Lisa asked. "What did you do this time?" "Nothing too crazy," Helen said, but her smile suggested otherwise. "I just took a shortcut through the Magellan Nebula." Zephix's translator worked on the word nebula. When it finished, he felt dizzy. A nebula was a cloud of gas and debris in space, often with dangerous radiation and unpredictable gravitational fields. Most species marked them as no-travel zones. "The Magellan Nebula?" Roy said. "Isn't that the one where 3 different alien governments have posted warnings saying it's impossible to navigate?" "That's the one," Helen confirmed. "They've got signs in 17 different languages all saying the same thing. Extreme danger. No passage. Violators will not be rescued." "So naturally, you decided to see if they were right," Danny said, not sounding surprised at all. "Well, the normal route around the nebula takes 3 weeks," Helen explained. "My cargo was medical supplies for a colony that needed them in 5 days. Simple math said I had to try the shortcut." Zephix gripped his drink tighter. This human had risked her life and her ship to deliver medical supplies faster. It should have been admirable except for the part where she had ignored the warnings of multiple advanced civilizations. "How bad was it?" Pete asked. "The first day was pretty normal," Helen said. "Just some electrical storms and minor radiation. My ship's shielding handled it fine." "And after that?" Lisa prompted. "That's when things got interesting. The navigation computer gave up completely, said the gravitational fields were too chaotic to plot a course, so I switched to manual control and started flying by instinct." Zephix's analysis device, which he had thought was completely broken, suddenly came back to life and started beeping frantically. Flying through a nebula by instinct was not just dangerous, it was mathematically impossible. There were too many variables for any biological brain to process. "You flew through an unmappable nebula by guessing?" Roy asked, sounding impressed, rather than horrified. "Not guessing," Helen corrected. "I use the old trader's trick. When you can't see where you're going, you follow the path that feels right." "The path that feels right?" Zephix said out loud, his voice cracking slightly. Helen looked at him with interest. "Sure. You get a feel for space after a while. The way gravity pulls, the way energy flows, the way particles move, it's like reading the current in a river. Except rivers don't have random gravity wells that can crush your ship, Danny pointed out. Details, Helen said with a wave of her hand. The important thing is, I made it through in 2 days instead of 3 weeks. The colonists got their medical supplies on time, and I proved that the nebula is perfectly navigable if you don't overthink it. Zefix's device was now making sounds he had never heard before. His own breathing was becoming shallow and quick. These humans were not just ignoring safety warnings. They were actively testing whether the warnings were correct by risking their lives. Did you report your successful route to the Trade Commission? Lisa asked. I tried, Helen said. But they said my navigation logs were impossible and not based on any known principles of spaceflight. They refused to update their charts. So the nebula is still marked as impassable? Pete asked. Officially, yes. But word gets around among traders. I've heard at least 6 other captains have used my route in the past month. Roy laughed. I love it. The government says it's impossible, so humans use it as a regular shipping lane. A new human had joined them while they were talking. This one looked different from the others. He wore glasses and clothes that seemed designed for thinking rather than physical work. His hands were clean and he carried a small computer device. Are you talking about impossible things again? The newcomer asked as he sat down. Kevin, Jake called out. Perfect timing. We were just discussing how humans like to prove that impossible things are actually possible. Kevin Foster ordered a drink and looked at the group with amusement. Well, you've come to the right person. I spend most of my time making impossible things work. What kind of work do you do? Zefix asked, though he was starting to dread the answer. I'm a research scientist, Kevin explained. I study alien technology and try to figure out how to make it better. Zefix felt his hearts, he had 2 of them, start beating faster. Make it better how? Usually by combining it with human technology, Kevin said. Alien tech is often very advanced, but it's also usually very specialized. It does one thing perfectly but can't adapt to new situations. And human technology? Danny asked. Human technology is the opposite. It's usually simpler and less efficient, but it's incredibly flexible. We build things that can be modified, repaired with whatever parts are available, and used for purposes the original designers never imagined. Helen nodded. Like Roy's coffee machine power coupling. Exactly, Kevin said, but I work on bigger projects. Last month, I took a Centauri computer core that could process information at incredible speeds, but only in very specific ways. I connected it to a human AI system that was much slower but could learn and adapt. What happened? Pete asked. The hybrid system now processes information faster than either component could alone, and it can learn new tasks that neither species originally designed it for. It's currently helping design new ship engines that work better than anything humans or Centaurians have built separately. Zefix's skin was now completely gray, and his breathing was rapid and shallow. These humans were not just ignoring the limitations of technology. They were actively breaking the rules that governed how different technologies were supposed to work. The funny thing is, Kevin continued, when I published the results, 3 different alien science committees said, my work was impossible. They said you can't just combine technologies from different species like that. But you did it anyway, Lisa said. Of course I did it anyway. Just because they say it's impossible doesn't mean it actually is impossible. It just means no one has tried the right approach yet. Roy raised his glass again. To proving the experts wrong. To trying things that should not work, Helen added. To making the impossible possible, Danny said. All the humans raised their glasses and drank together. Zefix stared at them finally, understanding the terrible truth. These humans did not see limitations as barriers to avoid. They saw them as challenges to overcome. They did not follow rules because rules were meant to keep them safe. They broke rules because breaking rules often led to better solutions. And most terrifying of all, they were successful at it. Against all logic, mathematics, and natural law, their approach actually worked. Zefix sat in stunned silence as the humans continued drinking and laughing around him. His gray skin had not changed color in several minutes, and his breathing was still quick and shallow. The realization that these creatures treated impossible Challenges as entertainment was slowly sinking into his mind like poison. A younger human approached the table, wearing the kind of clothes that suggested physical labor. His hands were dusty, and he had the tired but satisfied look of someone who had just finished a difficult job. "Mind if I join you?" the newcomer asked. "I just got off work and could use a drink." "Of course, Tony," Jake said, bringing over another chair. "What were you working on today?" Tony Reed sat down and accepted a beer from Jake. "Setting up the foundation supports for the new residential section. You know, the one they're building on the far side of the station." Zefix's translator processed this information. Building new sections of a space station was normal enough. Even his own people did construction projects. Perhaps this conversation would finally be about something sensible and safe. "How's that going?" Helen asked. "Pretty well, actually," Tony said, "though we did have to get creative with the location." Kevin looked interested. "Creative how?" "Well, the original plan was to build in the stable section near the main hull," Tony explained. "But then the engineers realized we could fit twice as many living units if we built in the area where the artificial gravity fluctuates." Zefix's skin flickered slightly, showing the first color change in several minutes. Artificial gravity fluctuations were dangerous. They could cause structural stress, make people sick, and create unpredictable forces that could tear buildings apart. "Fluctuating gravity?" Pete said. "That sounds like it would make construction pretty difficult." "It does," Tony agreed cheerfully. "Some days we're working in normal gravity. Other days we're floating around like we're in zero gravity, and sometimes the gravity gets so strong we can barely lift our tools." "So you're building homes in an area where the gravity changes randomly?" Danny asked. "Every day," Tony confirmed. "But that's what makes it interesting. We've had to design buildings that can handle any gravity condition from 0 to about 3 times normal." Zefix felt his heart's racing again. These humans were not just living with dangerous conditions. They were choosing to build their homes in dangerous areas because it was more challenging. "How do you make a building that works in changing gravity?" Lisa asked. "Flexible joints, adjustable foundations, and a lot of creative engineering," Tony said. "The buildings can literally reshape themselves depending on what the gravity is doing. When it's high gravity, they spread out and get shorter. When it's low gravity, they extend upward to use the space more efficiently." Roy nodded appreciatively. "So, instead of avoiding the problem, you designed a solution that actually makes the problem useful." "Exactly," Tony said. "Plus, the residents love it. They say living in changing gravity keeps life interesting. Some of them actually request rooms in the areas where the fluctuations are strongest." Zefix made a small choking sound. These humans were not just surviving in dangerous conditions. They were paying to live in them because they found them entertaining. "Speaking of keeping things interesting," Jake said from behind the bar, "has anyone mentioned to our friend Zefix here about the station's orbit?" All the humans turned to look at Zefix, who suddenly felt very exposed and nervous. "What about the orbit?" Zefix managed to ask. Jake wiped down a glass and smiled. "Well, Haven's Rest isn't exactly in what you'd call a stable orbit." "What do you mean?" Zefix asked, though he was beginning to suspect he did not want to know. "We're slowly falling toward the gas giant," Helen explained matter-of-factly. "The orbit decays a little bit every year." Zefix's skin suddenly shifted to bright yellow, then orange, then red. "You are falling toward a gas giant?" "Very slowly," Tony said reassuringly. "We've got at least 50 years before it becomes a real problem, and someone will probably figure out how to fix it long before then," Kevin added. "Fix it how?" Zefix asked in a voice that was getting higher. "Oh, there are lots of options," Kevin said. "We could attach engines to the station to boost our orbit, or we could use the gravity of passing ships to gradually push us back to a stable position, or we could wait until we get closer to the gas giant and use its gravity to slingshot ourselves to a completely different orbit." "You could evacuate," Zefix suggested weakly. The humans looked at him with confused expressions. "Why would we evacuate?" Pete asked. "This is our home. Besides," Lisa added, "the view during our close approach to the gas giant is going to be spectacular. Some people are already planning viewing parties for when we get within photo range. Zephyx stared at her. You are planning parties to watch yourselves fall toward a gas giant? Well, we're not going to fall into it, Danny said. That would be stupid. We're just going to get close enough for some really good pictures. Jake laughed and poured himself a drink. You know what the best part is? The tidal forces from getting closer to the gas giant are what cause our gravity fluctuations. So Tony's construction project only exists because we're in a slowly decaying orbit. And if we fix the orbit, Tony added, we'll lose the gravity fluctuations, which means we'll have to redesign all our new buildings. So we might not fix the orbit right away, Helen said. We might wait a few more years just to see what other interesting challenges the changing conditions create. Zephix's analysis device had started working again and was now displaying warning messages in 17 different languages. His skin was cycling through colors so rapidly that it looked like a flashing light. I need to leave, Zephix said suddenly, standing up so quickly that his chair fell over. Already? Jake asked. But you just got here, and we haven't even told you about the time humans discovered faster-than-light travel. How did humans discover faster-than-light travel? Zephix asked, then immediately regretted the question. A drunk physicist named Sam Murphy decided to see what would happen if he reversed the polarity on an alien power core that everyone said was impossible to modify. Kevin explained. Zephix made another choking sound. It exploded, of course. Kevin continued. But it exploded in a very specific way that created a temporary hole in space-time. Sam managed to fly his ship through the hole before it closed. And that is how you developed space travel technology? Zephix asked in horror. That's how we developed better space travel technology, Helen corrected. We already had ships. Sam just made them faster by breaking something that wasn't supposed to be breakable. Zephix turned and walked quickly toward the door, his analysis device beeping frantically and his skin flashing like an emergency beacon. Thanks for visiting, Jake called after him. Come back any time. Tomorrow we're having a discussion about human terraforming techniques. Zephix ran. 3 days later, Zephix sat in a small white room on an Altarian medical ship, talking to Dr. Vex, the fleet's head psychiatrist. His skin was a steady pale blue, the color his species showed when experiencing deep trauma. Tell me again about these humans, Dr. Vex said gently. They treat physics like suggestions, Zephix said, staring at the wall. They use the word impossible as a personal challenge. They build their homes in dangerous places because it makes life more interesting. Dr. Vex made notes on a tablet. And this disturbs you because? Because they are successful at it, Zephix said, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything they do should kill them, but instead it makes them stronger and more advanced. They do not survive despite their recklessness. They thrive because of it. Dr. Vex set down the tablet and looked at Zephix with concern. What do you recommend in your report to the collective? Zephix's skin flickered between blue and gray. Immediate quarantine of all human space. Not because they are hostile, but because they are fundamentally incompatible with rational civilization. And if they try to contact us? Run, Zephix said. Run very fast and very far. And whatever you do, never accept their invitation to visit their bars. Back at Murphy's Cantina, Jake was serving drinks to the usual crowd when a new customer walked in. This one was tall, blue-skinned, and had 6 arms. Welcome to Murphy's, Jake said with a smile. What can I get you? The alien looked around nervously. I am here to conduct cultural observations of human social behavior. Jake grinned. Well, you've come to the right place. Let me tell you about the time my customers decided to fix our decaying orbit by turning the whole station into a giant slingshot. The alien's 6 eyes went wide, and it began backing toward the door.